Most people who want to invest in real estate believe they're waiting for one thing: enough capital. Enough saved for the down payment. Enough reserves to cover the unexpected costs. Enough of a financial cushion to make the risk feel manageable. And so they wait, saving toward a threshold, watching the market, telling themselves the move will happen when the capital position is strong enough. The threshold keeps moving. The market keeps changing. The capital never feels quite enough. And the entry never happens. The capital myth has a specific structure. It takes the most capital-intensive version of real estate entry, a conventional acquisition, 20% down, full reserves, no creative structure, and presents it as the only version, which makes the capital requirement feel fixed, significant, a hard threshold that must be cleared before entry is possible. And for someone watching that threshold from a position of building capital slowly, the entry feels permanently deferred. Not impossible, just always slightly out of reach. Which produces the same result as impossible. The entry doesn't happen. The position never gets started. The compounding clock never starts. The myth is compounded by how real estate gets discussed publicly. The deals that get attention, the transactions that get documented, the success stories that get shared, are almost always the ones that involved significant capital. Large down payments, full cash purchases, portfolios built from a position of substantial initial capital. These are real, they happen, but they represent one entry path among several, and the visibility of the capital-intensive path makes the other paths feel like exceptions, things that work for other people in different circumstances, rather than legitimate structures available to anyone with the right knowledge and positioning. The perception problem matters because it shapes behavior before any actual barrier is encountered. Most people never reach the point of seriously evaluating a deal, of running real numbers, of exploring actual financing structures, because the capital myth has already told them they're not ready. Not yet. Not until the savings are larger. Not until the position is stronger. And so the preparation that would actually move them toward entry, the underwriting knowledge, the market understanding, the network of people who transact in this space, never gets built. Because the capital myth convinced them to wait for something that would make starting feel safe, rather than building the things that would make starting possible. Capital is necessary, at some point, in some form, but it is rarely the first barrier. The first barriers are knowledge and positioning, understanding how deals work, understanding how they're financed, understanding what makes a deal attractive to the people who have capital and are looking for the right opportunities. Most people who successfully enter real estate without significant initial capital didn't get there by saving longer. They got there by removing the other barriers first: the knowledge gaps, the underwriting ability, the network, the positioning, until capital became the last barrier. And then finding ways to address that last barrier creatively. The capital myth keeps people working on the last barrier first, while the real barriers remain unaddressed, and the entry stays deferred. If capital isn't the primary barrier, what is? The honest answer is that most people who don't enter real estate don't lack capital as their primary obstacle. They lack the knowledge to evaluate a deal, the network to find deals worth evaluating, the underwriting skill to know what a deal is worth, the risk tolerance that comes from understanding what can go wrong and how to manage it. These are the real barriers, and they're addressed differently than a capital shortfall is. Knowledge is the first real barrier. Real estate transactions are complex. Legal structures, financing arrangements, title and ownership mechanics, lease structures, market analysis, property condition assessment. Most people approaching real estate for the first time don't understand these mechanics well enough to evaluate whether a specific deal makes sense in a specific context. And without that understanding, every deal feels risky in a way that's hard to quantify. Not because every deal is bad, because the tools to evaluate which deals are bad haven't been developed yet. That knowledge gap, not the capital gap, is what keeps most people in the evaluation phase indefinitely. Deal flow is the second real barrier. Most people looking for real estate deals look in the same places as everyone else: public listings, online marketplaces, properties that have been marketed broadly and are therefore priced to reflect the full competitive market. The deals that get done at the most favorable terms, the off-market transactions, the motivated seller situations, the properties that haven't been broadly marketed, come through networks, through relationships, through being positioned as someone who can execute when an opportunity appears. Most people don't have that positioning, not because it's inaccessible, because building it requires time and intentionality, showing up in the right spaces, developing relationships with people who transact, building a reputation for being able to move. And most people are waiting to build that network until after they have the capital, when, in reality, the network often precedes the capital, and sometimes replaces it. Underwriting skill is the third real barrier. Underwriting is the ability to look at a deal, a specific property, in a specific market, at a specific price, and determine what it's actually worth under realistic operating assumptions. Not what the seller says it's worth, not what the listing implies, what the income, expenses, financing, and exit combine to produce as a return on invested capital. This skill takes time to develop. It requires analyzing deals, many deals that never get purchased, building the pattern recognition to see quickly what the numbers are likely to show before spending hours building the full analysis. Most people haven't done that work because they believe the work starts after they have the capital, when, in reality, the work that produces the capital starts long before the capital arrives. The real barriers compound each other. Without knowledge, deals feel uniformly risky. Without deal flow, only the worst opportunities are visible. Without underwriting skill, there's no way to separate the good deals from the bad ones. And without all three, capital alone doesn't produce a successful entry. It just produces an expensive mistake made with more money. The people who enter real estate effectively, regardless of their initial capital position, addressed these barriers first. They built the knowledge, they developed the network, they learned to underwrite. And then, they found ways to address the capital barrier, often discovering that the other barriers being cleared made the capital barrier significantly smaller than it appeared from the outside. Most content talks at you. This one sits with you. If that difference stood out, if this felt real instead of loud, like the video, subscribe. This channel is built for people who notice patterns. Real estate transactions don't always look the way most people imagine. The standard mental model is straightforward. Buyer has capital, buyer makes down payment, bank provides mortgage, transaction closes. That model is real. It's common. It's how many transactions happen. But it's one structure among many, and most people are only aware of that one. The first alternative structure is seller financing. In a seller-financed transaction, the seller acts as the lender. The buyer makes payments directly to the seller rather than to a bank. The terms are negotiated between the parties. The down payment requirement can be significantly lower than conventional financing demands. The qualification standards are determined by the seller, not by a bank's underwriting criteria. Seller financing exists because sellers sometimes have motivations that make a conventional sale less attractive than a structured payment arrangement. Tax deferral on a large gain, steady income from the interest payments, a faster transaction without bank timelines and requirements. These motivations create opportunities for buyers who understand the structure and know how to present it. The second alternative structure is partnerships. Real estate partnerships allow the skills and the capital to come from different people. One party brings the deal, the underwriting, the market knowledge, the ability to find, evaluate, and manage the asset. Another party brings the capital, the down payment, the reserves, the financial position required for the financing. Each party contributes something the other needs. Each party receives a portion of the return commensurate with their contribution. This structure exists because knowledge and capital are not always in the same hands, and when they can be brought together, both parties can access a deal neither could have executed alone. The third alternative structure is creative acquisition, subject to transactions, lease options, master lease arrangements, wraparound financing. Each of these represents a different way of controlling or acquiring a property without a conventional cash purchase. Subject-to transactions allow a buyer to take over an existing mortgage, acquiring the property without new financing. Lease options allow control of a property and the right to purchase at a future date, without immediate acquisition. Master lease arrangements allow management and income rights without full ownership, as a step toward eventual acquisition. These structures are more complex. They require deeper knowledge to execute. They involve legal and financial nuances that conventional transactions don't. But they exist. They're used regularly by investors who understand them. And they represent entry points into real estate that don't require the capital that conventional acquisition does. None of these alternatives are without risk or complexity. Seller financing requires a motivated seller. Partnerships require aligned incentives and clearly structured agreements. Creative acquisition requires legal competence and thorough due diligence. But the complexity of these structures is addressed through knowledge, not through capital. And knowledge is the barrier that can be removed before the capital exists. The investors who transact through these alternative structures are not doing something unusual. They're using tools that have existed for decades, that are standard practice in sophisticated real estate markets, that most people never explore because they believe the conventional structure is the only one available. The investors who access real estate deals without full capital positions didn't get there by waiting. They got there by becoming valuable before they had the capital. And that distinction between waiting for capital and building value toward capital is the core of what separates the people who enter from the people who stay on the outside. Positioning precedes capital. Not always, not in every case, but in the cases where capital isn't the starting point, where deals get done through partnerships, through creative structures, through relationships, the capital comes to the person who has made themselves valuable to people who have it. The person who can find deals, who can underwrite them accurately, who can manage the asset effectively once acquired, who can bring something to the transaction that the capital alone cannot provide. That person doesn't need to wait for the capital to be theirs. They need to build the capability that makes other people's capital available to them. What does that positioning look like in practice? It looks like learning to underwrite before having anything to underwrite, analyzing deals that will never be purchased, building the skill, developing the pattern recognition, understanding what good deals look like compared to bad ones. Until the underwriting becomes credible to other investors, to potential partners, to the people in the space who are looking for someone who can do this reliably. It looks like building the network before needing it, showing up where real estate investors show up, developing relationships with people who transact, being useful before asking for anything, building a reputation as someone who understands the space and can be trusted to execute. It looks like doing the work that most people believe only starts after the capital arrives. Because the work that produces entry is not the work of saving. It's the work of becoming someone who belongs in the room, who understands the deals, who knows the market, who has the network, who can execute. And that person, built through preparation rather than waiting, finds the capital question resolves differently than it does for someone who showed up with capital but nothing else. Capital without positioning produces expensive mistakes. Positioning without capital produces creative solutions. The person with deep knowledge and strong underwriting and a real network is fundable. Not always, not instantly, but fundable in a way that the person waiting to save a larger down payment is not. Because the real estate market doesn't just reward capital. It rewards the ability to find value, underwrite accurately, and execute reliably. Capital is the input. That ability is what makes the capital productive. And the people who develop the ability first, who position themselves as someone who can make capital work, find that capital has a way of finding them, before they expected it, and in forms they didn't anticipate. If this shifted something for you, subscribe. Like this if it clarified something.